and we were taken away. My father and I, we went on one truck. My mother and a brother and two sisters went on another truck, and of course all the rest of the people were all separated, the young from the old and the sick.
So when they loaded us on the train, they gave us, there was no toilet, a bucket. You can imagine. The train was a freight train. We slept on the floor. There was even no room. We were almost one on top of the other because there was about 100 people, standing room only, so you imagine. Dignity was taken away. We had to go in that bucket in front of everybody. You know how you felt? I cannot, it's hard to say what you could feel when you have to go pull down your pants in front of everybody else. But nature calls and you gotta go. Food was very minimal, was no. We were hungry and we already wanted to get there. It took us 4 days and 4 nights. Can you imagine? And that bucket was once in a while emptied, you know, when we stopped, and it was spilling while it was all over the floor. Stench. Some people were dying, old people were dying. There was no food, and we were already so tired. We all said, I wish we get there.
And forced labor camp, we were told by the Wehrmacht that they all went to Auschwitz. And of course, the horror was just about to begin when I found out where my mother and brothers and sisters went. Of course, then we got our name. But no, my name was no longer Ben Feiner. My name was 178873.
124, 083.
We get a meal once a day, and a relative we get 2 meals. But I wouldn't give it to any animal. It was a joke. You used to crack in between the teeth because they shovel it into to a big boiler. They pick the crap up from the ground and dump it in.
And I've been on a different floor, and I've been ill of dysentery. I've been in dysentery 3-4 days in the barrack, and I wake up in the morning, and this people dead, this people dead, and I finish the bed.
And this was the worst horror that I have ever witnessed or seen. The way there's no words in my vocabulary that I can describe to you what Buchenwald was like. Seeing the bodies stacked up, I don't know, it's been hundreds, maybe a couple of thousand or more. They couldn't shove them into the crematorium fast enough. And I used to see guys shoved into the crematorium, they were alive, but they couldn't stand, they couldn't walk from the lack of nourishment and the horror that they couldn't take. A lot of people, you know, couldn't take it because they didn't get enough food and they could not survive.
I saw the beak, nothing.
So the pain of listening at night to what are being shoved in, because there was Germans that were in civilian clothes that had the job of shoving all the bodies that were there stacked up on the ground. The fire was constantly going, okay? And this is what I lived with for over a year.
So my first experience, we asked there in the SS, when are we going to see our parents? Guess what they told us? See this? Where it's burning, that's where they are. Your parents and your family are there.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvoto v'tzevanu l'echad mineh shel Shavuos.
She's over there! Ganz Europa erobert!
I can't go out there. I don't want to go out there. Why should I be another number adding to their rising figure, a figure that will continually rise? I'm hated. Hated by so many, and I know it will be the case for years to come. But I never thought it was wrong. As a child, I would sit with my father and listen on the radio. I'd listen with such awe. Heil Hitler would repeat over and over again. It's fair to say that he was my idol, and I always knew that one day I would join his party. Fight for what was right. Kill the Jews, murder their children, execute the wrong, wipe their stain from the world. It's all Hitler ever wanted, and all I ever wanted was just to please Hitler. I waited until I was of legal age to sign up. It was the best day of my life. My father returned from his weekly duties, and we sat by the radio once more and listened to Hitler address our people. It always felt so intimate, as though he was talking directly to me. As the war became intense, I was finally called to serve my people, to prove that I believed in Hitler as he had always believed in me. I was moved throughout different camps during Poland, and I vividly remember that first Jew I shot. I spat on the floor in disgust as the train carriage opened to reveal hundreds of the devil. I caught a little boy looking at me, and I thought, no way. No way will you actually get away with looking at me like that. So I pulled him out from the crowd, and his mother screamed the most gut-wrenching scream that one could ever imagine. I shot that boy. I shot him right in the head, and he died instantly. But I continued shooting. I had such anger. I shot him in the head again. His bloody body fell to the floor, useless. His mother continued screaming until no sound escaped her mouth. I shot her too. I then looked at all the children and just laughed and smiled. I now know that looking into the cold, dead eyes of that little boy, that it was a reflection of vermin in myself. But only now, only decades later, only now do I truly realize I was the vermin. I was the true devil.
Die große Zeit ist jetzt angebrochen. Deutschland ist nun erwacht. Die Macht haben wir nun in Deutschland gewonnen. Nun gilt es, das deutsche Volk zu gewinnen. Ich weiß es, wenn ich aber sagen, es ist euch wohl noch schwer gefallen, wenn ihr meint, es müsse um das Wandel kommen und der Zahl nicht und in der Wiese muss der weiter hergelegt werden.
Horrors of the Holocaust.
The ones that could work went to work, the ones that couldn't work went to Auschwitz.
Fireplace.
And we were like sardines, put them next to one another.
There's only so far that anything can go.
Never be repeated or forgotten.
Systematically try to eradicate their own people.
I lost my mother in the air raid.
Because people weren't there at the time it happened. They sort of look at it through rose-tinted glasses and think, oh, it wouldn't have been that bad.
Where was man during the Holocaust?
People being ostracised and humiliated.
Purely by the fact that they were Jewish.
See a line of people waiting to go to their death, basically. And there was one Nazi standing there with a gun to the guy's head, who was sitting facing the pit, facing all the dead bodies in the bottom of it. And you could see just no emotion in the man's face, that you couldn't see no fear. He was just numb.
Children were taken from schools.
People make assumptions about how bad it was. But I think the things that I've been told about it are so unimaginable that people don't comprehend how horrific it actually must have been.
And I still didn't believe what happened.
In 1999, I visited Germany for the very first time on a business trip.
During some off time, I had the opportunity to visit Dachau. As a Jew, I felt it was my obligation to do so. Walking around Dachau was a very sobering experience. I was able to visit the museum, and then later on the huts. And walking around, I was able to visit and actually enter the gas chamber, where so many people had been mass murdered. After bodies had been taken out of the gas chamber, I was able to visit the crematorium, but there are still ovens today for people to go and see. It's an unbelievable experience to go and see such a vile place. During my trip there, which lasted around about 3 hours, I had the urge to leave. I was with a colleague who wasn't Jewish, and he said, "Why are we leaving now?" And I said, "Because we can."
The Holocaust has never been forgotten. The atrocities that that horrible little man and his cohorts inflicted on the inmates of those horror camps were beyond human reason and must never be repeated or forgotten. But there were others outside the camps who suffered, people being ostracised and humiliated because of their creed, colour or religious beliefs in their own towns, villages and homes. In England, children were taken from schools and taken to what were deemed safe areas of the country and billeted out for families. Most were very kind, but others used them as farm hands and cheap labour. Can you imagine how children as young as 5 felt being taken away from their family and homes to a strange area and into a different environment? London and the north were subjected to heavy bombing, and to see people losing their homes and their lives was another horrific act. I lost my mother in an air raid, and a bomb hit the shelter she was in, with another 150 lives. And my family, the producer's great-grandmother, are still suffering with her loss, even after over 70-odd years. I was just 5 years old. And what was it for? To satisfy the maniacal ambition of a little man to rule the world and in his mind to cleanse the planet of the so-called impurities of the human race.
For me, the scale of the horror of the Holocaust was the fact that whilst the Nazis were engaged in a world war, they were at the same time systematically trying to eradicate their own people, particularly the Jewish people. For me, that really ramps up the scale of the tragedy and the horror of it, really the evil of it, that they picked the Jewish people particularly and systematically set about trying to eradicate them purely by the fact that they were Jewish. Although there have been other genocides in the past and since, this perhaps is marked out by the fact that the scale of it and the fact that they were particularly targeted for that reason only because of their religion. And at the same time, being residents in their own home, in their country, and at the same time a war going on with the rest of the world. Famously said, people ask, where was God during the Holocaust? And the answer can be given is, where was man during the Holocaust? That the world knew what was going on and could have, if they wanted to, done something to stop it. And yet sadly, they sat and let it happen. That just adds to the scale of the tragedy and the evil that was perpetuated during the Holocaust.
Yisborach v'yishtabach v'yispora v'yishravam v'yisnasei v'yisa'ada v'yisa'aleh v'yisa'alal shemei d'gadashah brichu Y'eilo min kol brichasa v'shirasa tishbechasa v'nechemasa Y'amiram v'yalma v'imru amen Yehei shalom arabah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru amen Osei shalom b'mremav Hu yasei shalom aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru amen